Thanks a lot. I want to ask you about Merrick Garland's testimony today before the Senate Judiciary Committee. He was asked a number of questions in regards to Hunter Biden and the ongoing investigation that's being conducted by the U.S. Attorney in Delaware. And during that particular testimony, he said it would be a national security problem if the president's son had been receiving payments from a foreign government as a means to influence the administration. Do you agree with that statement from the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the U.S.?
We're going to continue to be prudent from here and not speak to any investigation that is currently underway by the Department of Justice. And when it comes to Hunter Biden, I would refer you to his personal representative. He is a private citizen, so I will leave it there. And we're going to continue to be consistent from here.
Let me ask you another question on a separate matter, entirely a foreign policy matter. 2 Iranian warships are going to dock in port in Brazil on Sunday. As you well know, the president of Brazil was just here meeting with President Biden. President Biden lauded the shared values of both countries. Do you have any issue with Iranian warships docking in port in Brazil?
And so we've been very clear when we've been asked these types of questions of meetings or any engagement. We just won't speak to that from here. I would refer you to the respective countries. I'm just not going to speak to a potential meeting or a potential engagement. Just not going to do that from here. Go ahead, Courtney.
It's not a meeting.
Oh, well, I'm just not going to. Clearly, there's some sort of engagement happening. I'm just not going to speak to that from here. Go ahead, Courtney.
Thanks, Karine. I wanted to ask about the trial going on in Arkansas with Hunter Biden and the child support. Are the president and First Lady monitoring that? And how come they haven't acknowledged the 7th grandchild?
I'm not going to speak to that from here.
Why not?
Go ahead.
What is happening with the COVID-19 task force after May 11th? Would Dr. Job depart? What about remaining staff?
So we'll have more to share on that in the upcoming weeks.
Thank you. If the border is secure, as the administration has said, then why would we need to send 1,500 active duty U.S. troops down there?
Because we need more work. More work needs to be done, Peter. We put forth a comprehensive immigration legislation, and Congress, Republicans in Congress refused to act. And so the president has used the tools that he has in front of him to prepare ahead of Title 42 lifting. As you know, that is happening in the next couple of days. And so we are putting DHS, Department of State, is putting forth processes to deal with the changes that are going to be ahead of us. And so that is what's important here, and that's what you've been seeing for the past several months. You've heard from DHS, you've heard from the State Department on what we're putting in place to deal with the border once Title 42 lifts.
We have a report on the DOJ nearing a decision on whether to charge President Biden's son Hunter with tax and gun-related violations. I wonder if the White House has any comment on this case, if it's something the president has been following, or if he talks to Hunter about this case at all.
I would have to refer you to Department of Justice. Go ahead, Stephen.
Well, the question about Austin Tice. Deborah Tice's mother said this week that she believes after all these years it's time for rapprochement with Syria. What's the president's stance on that?
One more time, that last part?
Yeah.
It's time to...
Rapprochement. Yeah. What's the president's stance on that?
So, look, as I mentioned, the president himself called on Syria to help us bring Austin home. He has said that before. Look, the president spoke to the pain and that Austin's family is going through. You heard from him directly during the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and our hearts go out to her. We cannot even imagine, don't even want to imagine what she's going through every day. But the president is committed to bringing our Americans who are wrongfully detained and held hostage home. And Austin certainly is one of those Americans that we are doing everything that we can to bring him home. And so that's what the...
And then secondly, The president invited his son Hunter to the state dinner last night. I'm wondering if you could take us into the thinking and the decision-making of why the president decided to invite his son.
I'm just not going to get into family discussion, personal family discussion. As you know, Hunter is his son. I'm just not going to get
Let
into
me ask you
it.
this. If Hunter Biden wasn't the president's son, would he have invited someone who had just reached a plea agreement with federal prosecutors 2 days
Well,
earlier?
a couple of things. Again, that's his son. He's a family member. It is not uncommon for family members to attend events at the White House. You could look at past presidents. I'm sure you have. So that is not uncommon. As it relates to anything related to Hunter, I'm just not going to respond to it from here.
Can I follow up on that?
No, I just called in somebody. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Curley wouldn't answer James's question, though. Are you going to answer the question? I mean, not an unreasonable question to ask, whether the President of the United States was involved, as this message seems to suggest, in some sort of a coercive conversation for business dealings by his son. Is that something, if he wasn't, then maybe you should tell us.
So here's the thing, and I appreciate the question. I believe my colleague at the White House Counsel has answered this question already, has dealt with this, has made it very clear. I just don't have anything to share outside of what my colleagues have shared, and so I would refer you to him and the DOJ. Just not going to comment from here.
Text message.
What I can tell you is I know that my colleague has dealt with this. He addressed this at the White House Counsel. I just don't have anything else to share.
In the shakedown
I just answered the question. I just answered the question.
No, you didn't. Yes or no? Was the president involved in the
I just
shakedown attempt?
Stephen, I just answered the question. It's not up to you how I answer the question. I just answered the question by telling you my colleagues at the White House Counsel has dealt with this, and I would refer you to them. Go ahead.
Karine, can you just remind us what your colleague said from the White House Counsel, so we have it?
I would refer you to them, and they will share their statement with all of you.
My question is about your statements from that podium. You've stated that the president stands by his comment from the 2020 campaign that he never once discussed his son's overseas business dealings with his son. And you stood at that podium and you reaffirmed that. Do you stand by your reaffirmation?
What I will say is nothing has changed. Nothing has changed, and I will leave it there. Anything else, I will refer you to the White House Counsel.
This is not a change?
I just answered the question. You just asked me, does my statement change? I just told you nothing has changed. That's answering the question. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The president was there 2 days
Go ahead,
prior.
Stephen. I'm calling on your colleague right now. Go ahead.
Thank you. To follow up on my colleague, is there anything that you can say with regard to this text message and what the president's son was alleging? Was the president there or not?
I would refer you to my colleagues at the White House Counsel. They have addressed this, and I refer you to them. What I can say is that DOJ, again, is reviewing the injunction, and they're going to look into, evaluate our options. So just not going to get ahead of that, and so I'll just leave that from here. Okay.
Will any White House staffers be undergoing drug testing as part of this investigation?
So as you know, again, this is under the purview of the Secret Service, but a couple of things that I would add is that White House is subject to rigorous guidelines that include drug testing, and so we will take any action that is appropriate and warranted pending the outcome of the Secret Service. Just not going to get into hypotheticals from here, but this is something that when it comes to drug testing, certainly we take that very seriously, and so there are indeed rigorous guidelines here at the White House.
One more. There was a story in the New York Times over the weekend about Hunter Biden's daughter in Arkansas. Does the president acknowledge this little girl as his granddaughter?
I don't have anything to share from here. Okay.
Thanks, Karine.
Okay. All right, Darlene, what you got?
Thank you. Have you seen the president since Hunter Biden showed up in federal court, since the deal fell apart? Did he have any reaction that he has agreed to allow you to share with us?
So I'll tell you this, and I'll repeat this as what I said at the top, which is the president loves his son. The president and the first lady love their son, and they support him as he's rebuilding his life and trying to move forward. I have not spoken to the president today. He has been busy continuing to work on behalf of the American people, as he does every day with internal meetings, and so I will leave it there. Now, I know many people have been following the news in Delaware today and we're going to have a lot of questions, and so here's what I'll say at the top before I turn it over to my colleague, the Admiral. Hunter Biden is a private citizen, and this was a personal matter for him. As we have said, the President, the First Lady, they love their son, and they support him as he continues to rebuild his life. This case was handled independently, as all of you know, by the Justice Department under the leadership of a prosecutor appointed by the former president, President Trump. So for anything further, as you know, and we've been very consistent from here, I'd refer you to the Department of Justice and to Hunter's representatives, who is his legal team, obviously, who can address any of your questions. With that, I have the Admiral here, Admiral John Kirby, who's going to take any foreign policy questions you all may have, and also give a preview of an important meeting that the President's going to have tomorrow, a bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister.
Can you discuss at all the President's personal reaction to, as a father, of the special counsel being appointed to continue the Hunter Biden probe?
So let me just first say, and you've heard me say this before, that this case was handled independently by the Justice Department under leadership of a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, as you all know. This is consistent with what the President has been saying for a long while now, going way back to his campaign days, that he would restore the Department of Justice independence from political interference from the White House. And this is, want to make sure that we continue that. Since the White House hasn't been involved, just to be clear again, certainly I would refer you to any questions about this specifically to Department of Justice and certainly to Hunter Biden's personal representatives. I will say this, and you've heard this from the President, is that he loves his son. And he is proud of him overcoming his addiction and how he's continuing to build his life, but I don't have anything else to add to that.
And I wanted to follow up on...
Something else. The Secret Service is paying $16,000 a month now to stage near Hunter Biden in Malibu. Who's paying for that?
That's a question for the Secret Service.
Okay, Hunter Biden is reportedly selling art to pay for his $15,800 a month rent in Malibu. How can you guarantee that people are not going to be buying this art to gain favor with the president?
That is a question for Hunter Biden and his representatives.
It's a question
I know.
of
I hear.
ethics at the White House. We know that one of the art
question.
buyers got a job from the Biden administration. Can you guarantee that there's no quid pro quo?
I hear your question. I'm not going to get involved in this. That is a question for Hunter Biden's representatives.
But we know that from a Hunter Biden associate now that he sold the appearance of access to then Vice President Biden. Are you confident that he has stopped doing that?
That is a question for Hunter Biden and
If
his
somebody is
representatives.
selling the appearance of access to the White House, that's a question for the White House.
No, that is your I don't know how you're perceiving that.
Sworn testimony by Devin Archer. He said.
I am just not, Peter. I'm just not going to get into this. I'm just not.
So, this testimony, since the last time that I was in here, Devin Archer talks about how he and Hunter Biden tried to profit off the Biden brand. What is the Biden brand?
Not going to get into it from here.
Second one, would the president pardon or commute his son if he's convicted?
So I've answered this question before. It was asked of me not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I was very clear, and I said no. Go ahead, Mary.
Thanks. The president said today record profits for the automakers should mean record contracts for the UAW. Does that mean that he supports a 40% raise in these new contracts?
I'm not going to get into the specifics. I mean, the president has always said that there should be, that he believes in fair wages and fair benefits for workers. That is nothing new, right? He believes in making sure that workers are able to raise their family, right? To be able to have what they need to do that in a way that is very fair. And so that's nothing new. The president has said that. Look, what we're going to continue to say is the president is going to urge the parties back to the table to hammer out a win-win agreement. That's what the president wants to see. We appreciate the parties continuing to do that on a 24/7 basis, and the president believes that the companies must go further, as you just mentioned, to ensure that record profits mean a record contract. And it's simple as that. He wants. I'm not going to get into the specifics. What the president made himself very clear. We have always been really clear. He respects workers' rights to use their options for collective bargaining. That's what we're seeing. The collective bargaining system works past. We've seen that happen multiple times in the last 2 years under this president, and certainly he understands their frustration, but he's going to continue to encourage to have that conversation, continuing to negotiate.
And can you tell us if the president has talked to his son since these charges came down yesterday?
Yeah, there's nothing new here. As I've been asked that question many times, I'm not going to get into private conversations that the president has with his family. I'm just not going to speak to it.
Will those conversations, though, have to change given the heightened scrutiny or these charges?
I'm just not going to get into private conversations that the president has with his family.
How damaging do you expect the strike to be to the U.S. economy?
So I'm not going to certainly not get into hypotheticals from here. Look, we are going to continue to monitor. That is something that we do here to see what is going to be happening here, and we're closely monitoring the situation. But no decision has been made on any path forward. And so again, we're going to monitor, we're going to encourage, and we're actually we're happy to see that the negotiation is continuing to happen, to continue to occur. We're going to see them, as the UAW stated, they're going to get back together tomorrow, Saturday morning, and so that's what the president wants to see, collective bargaining happening at this level, at this time.
Hoping for a quick agreement? Is that what Gene and Julie are going to try
I
to
mean,
get?
look, Gene and Julie, as I mentioned, the acting secretary of Labor, and also Gene Sperling, who has played coordinator throughout this process, is going to do what they've been doing, engaging, offering assistance if they need it. And so we're going to continue to stay engaged. We're going to continue to monitor. This is nothing new. They've been engaging for some time now. But of course, this is up to the parties to come up with a win-win, we believe, agreement so that we can move forward. Okay. It's going to be very clear here. My colleagues at the White House counsel's office has already addressed this, so I would have to refer you to them. I don't have anything to add specifically on this. Okay. Oh, okay. Whoever, you already got a question. Go ahead, Phil.
Thank you. The White House has said repeatedly that the president and his son were never in business together. They've said that repeatedly also in this room. According to bank records obtained by the House Oversight Committee, though, one of Hunter Biden's businesses, Osawa PC, set up direct payments to the president. Did the president accept payment? And why would there be such an arrangement if they were never in business together, or if there was a wall of separation, as the president has previously said?
So I have to be clear with you. I have not seen that report, so I would have to refer you to my colleagues over at the White House counsel's office on that particular question. All right, everyone. See some of you in Boston or on Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I have two questions on the Hunter Biden case. Any reaction to to what we saw last night, new charges, and then I have a follow-up.
Look, I mean, the president has said this before, and he will continue to say, which is that he loves his son and supports him as he continues to rebuild his life. I'm going to be really careful and not comment on this and refer you to Department of Justice or my colleagues at the White House Counsel, but that's what I'm not going to go beyond telling you all what the president has said over and over again. He's proud of his son, and he is him building his life back up.
I know you want charges directly, but can you speak at least to the emotional toll the charges are having on the president?
I'm just not going to comment beyond what I just shared.
Are they speaking to each other?
I'm not going to, and we've been pretty consistent on this, I'm not going to comment on private conversation that the president has with his family members.
Headlines when we took off that Hunter Biden's attorney, Abby Lowell, has offered to testify, but publicly. Does the White House support that? Will White House counsel advise him? And should a witness get to negotiate under those terms on how they should be able to testify?
You know, here's what I'll say about that is House Republicans should really focus on American families instead of the president's family. That's what Americans want to see. They want to see, we just had a few minutes about talking about lowering costs and what matters to the American people just a second ago, and that's what they should be focused on. Focus on the American families and their needs and what they want, and not the president's family. Anything else that's related to this, I would certainly refer you to the White House counsel, my colleagues.
They're focused on it. Should he participate?
Pardon me?
They are focused on the Biden family, so should the president's son participate? Should he testify?
I just answered your question. I think I was very clear on what House Republicans should focus on. They should focus on the American family instead of the president.
Only because you said it before, I just want to re-up in light of these new charges. You've said before that the president would not pardon his son. Is that still the case?
Nothing has changed. That is still the case.
Thanks, Karine. You said that President Biden was familiar with what his son was going to say on Capitol Hill. If I called my dad and said, I am about to violate a congressional subpoena, he'd probably say, son, you shouldn't do that. Was there any attempt by President Biden to talk Hunter out of it today?
You're going to call your dad Steve?
Call him Dad, usually.
Look, I don't have anything else to add. The president was familiar with what Hunter was going to say today. Look, he's proud of his son. He and the First Lady are proud of his son, how he's rebuilding his life back. He's going to focus on what is needed on the American people. Hunter, and I've said this many times, is a private citizen. And so certainly I would have to refer you to his representatives. I'm just not going to get into private conversations because what you're asking me is actually a private conversation. I'm just not going to get into it.
First briefing since Hunter was indicted again in Los Angeles. Why doesn't President Biden just pardon him?
President, I've been very clear. The president's not going to pardon
And
his son.
one more about these this Ukraine money for border policy negotiations. In the last 24 hours, 10,000 illegal border crossings, southwest border. Would you admit that the border policy, the Biden border policy so far has not worked?
What I will say is that we have known for decades, that the immigration policy the immigration system is broken. We've said that over and over again. That has been Republican administration and Democratic administration. That is not unheard of. That is what we have seen for the past couple of decades. The president has put forth a comprehensive immigration policy legislation on his first day to deal with this issue. Republicans refuse. They refuse to deal with this issue. It's been almost 3 years since he put forth that legislation. So we're going to do what we can do from here, but we have said this is something that needs to be dealt with in a bipartisan way, About 1,000 of these illegal border crossers every day are getting away to parts unknown in the U.S. Does the president think that is a national security risk? Here's what I'll say. One of the ways that we also have to look at this is what congressional Republicans have refused to do. They refused to support previous requests from the president. What they've asked to do actually hurts the issue, hurts the problem that we're seeing at the border. Right. Thanks, John. I do want to say to the question that was asked about what the president is doing on the budget and the supplemental. And look, the president was very clear yesterday when he said that he wants to work to find a bipartisan compromise, both in terms of policy and funding in relation to the border. And we are encouraged by the progress being made during yesterday's meeting on Capitol Hill, obviously. The president understands that our immigration system is broken. This is something that has, not just this administration, as we've seen it in Republican and Democratic administration as well. And that's why on his first day, he put forth a comprehensive piece of legislation to deal with immigration reform. And so, look, the president has asked Congress for resources to take more action at the border. His supplemental request would allow us to do a couple of things: hire 1,300 more border agents and 1,000 more law enforcement officers to go after fentanyl, install more drug detentions technology at the border, hire more immigration judges and asylum officers. So we look forward to continuing those conversations. And as you know, you've heard me say this multiple times. You've heard from our OMB director. You've heard from Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor himself. We've talked about how the Office of Legislative Affairs have had conversations upon conversations for months now with Congress about this. So, and also, we've said that, and the president said this himself, he's been in touch regularly with congressional leaders and his staff, as I just mentioned, on negotiating on his behalf. So we are going to
focus on that. We appreciate, again, encouraged by the progress that's been made, but we're certainly not going to negotiate from the podium. Go ahead, Zeke.
On those negotiations on Capitol Hill, some of the items up for discussion, the policy changes the President alluded to, would severely curtail asylum in the United States, in some cases tightening policies beyond where they were under his predecessor, whose immigration policies he was sharply critical of, and in some cases even beyond that. Why is that acceptable for the President, who was so critical of his predecessor's immigration policies?
Look, I'm going to be careful. I'm not going to negotiate from the podium. I'm not going to get into whatever policy discussions are happening right now. We're going to be continuing our regular conversation with congressional leaders, as we have been doing for months. Just not going to get into parts of this right now. We are encouraged by the progress that has been made, but we want to see a bipartisan compromise. We want to see a bipartisan compromise on this. It's an important issue. We have said the border security is an important issue. I'm just not going to go into piecemeals of what's being discussed, left in or left out.
A piece of legislation that tightens asylum policies tighter than they were under his predecessor.
I'm just not going to get into hypotheticals from here. The conversations are happening, the negotiations are happening with members of our team here and obviously congressional leaders. We're encouraged by the progress that's been made. We understand that we need to see, and the President understands, we have to find a bipartisan compromise here.
And then just lastly from me, the President spent a lot of time in Congress, been around Washington a while. Does he believe that congressional subpoenas are something that individual citizens can ignore?
I'm just not going to speak to that. Just not.
Why not? Why not?
You want to be more specific on your question?
Just general. He's a former senator. He's issued subpoenas in his career. Does he believe that subpoenas have to be complied with?
I'm just going to have you speak to the White House counsel on this. I'm just not going to speak to that. Okay, I know. Emily.
Thanks, Karine. I have two questions, but they're tied together. With the holidays coming up, which members of the Biden family will be spending Christmas with the President and the First Lady? And then I noticed today when the President arrived on Marine One that Hunter Biden and his son Beau were also on the helicopter with them. The White House provides to the public a list of staffers who travel with the President. Why don't they provide a list of the family members that travel with the President on these government-funded?
I have to double check to see if that is indeed correct, because I did ask about that. So let me just double check. Look, I'll say this more broadly. Obviously, you've seen the President with his family these past couple of days, and I think you know why. They were observing a very somber anniversary for them, and so I'm not going to add anything more to that. But this was obviously a somber moment in the family, and so they were certainly together to acknowledge and take part in that anniversary. So we just want to be really sensitive to that and make that very, very clear. And don't have anything to add about the family. Obviously, the President is very close to his family as it relates to the holidays. He spends, obviously, every holiday with his family, mostly every holiday with his family. I just don't have a list of names to share with you at this time. Okay, JJ.